that which I have seen with my father, and ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said unto them, if ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. Ye do the deeds of your father. We be not born of fornication. We have one Father, even God. Jesus said.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing the book of Genesis. I'd actually wanted that part from John 8 when he says, before Abraham was, I am. But I hadn't clipped it properly, and I didn't have time to go get it. Okay. So, let's start reading. We're not going to read the whole of chapter 11. We already covered the Tower of Babel last time, and since we're not going to discuss it, and it will not come into play contextually, we're not going to reread it. Same thing with this genealogy. I did not do a very good job reading it last time. Don't suppose I will rivet you this time with my spectacular genealogical layout. I'm not sure how to put it into that. We're going to try. So let's start with chapter 11, verse 27. Let me just have a good cough here. I was figuring I sit here quietly. I should sing or something. I got to do warm-ups. I apologize for that. I need a warm-up every morning, I think. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. And the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah, the daughter of Haran. So Haran had more than one child when he died. The father of Milcah and the father of Ishkah. But Sarai was barren. And she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot his son, to Haran his son's son. And Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, his son's son obviously means grandson. And they went forth from them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Now the Lord had said unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make thee a great nation. I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came. And Abram passed through the land into the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Moreh. And the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. on one second. It's too bad. As I was beginning to get better, I'm actually coming down with some sort of something. Got a slight sore throat today. Okay. Into the land of Canaan they came, right? Okay. Yep. And Abram passed through the land into the place of Sichem. We read that. Unto the plain of Morah, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abraham, and said, Abram. I spoiled it. Spoiler. Abram, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed, going on still toward the south, and there was a famine in the land. And Abram went down into Egypt, to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarah his wife, maybe it's my position there for my chest, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold, now I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife. And they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abraham was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entreated Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep, and oxen, and asses, and men servants, and maidservants, and she-asses, and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues, because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, She is my sister? So I might have taken her to me to wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her, and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. So we had the concluding bit of, hold on a second, sorry. All right, so the concluding part of the previous chapter, we had the naming, we had the fact that Haran died before his father Terah in the land, he died where he was born. Before his father, which is notable, that's usually parents like to bury, parents don't like to bury their children, obviously. But, he is the father of Lot, the one who died early. It's interesting to me that I guess they, it's like when it says they went into the land in Haran, where Terah died. They came unto Haran. Was it named after Haran or not? I'm a little confused on that one. But anyways, it's not that important. Again, maybe it later became known as, that's Haran, where he lived and died. Hold on a second. And the idea is that I guess they'd been moving on the move somewhat. The days of Terah were 205 years, and he died in Haran. And again, and progressively, their lives got shorter. I don't believe Abraham lives that. I think he. I forgot. I thought his was he 120 or was that Moses? I'm thinking Moses probably. I forgot how old Abraham was, but we'll see. Now he had said to Abram, "Get you out of your country, and from your kindred, and from your father's house, unto a land I will show thee." I almost wonder when it says this, and it starts the beginning of Abram's story, the first man's story who we really follow. I mean, Noah we have a bit, but we're really going to get to know Abram. Because with Abraham, God establishes the covenant that he's promised from the beginning for the seed of the woman. That at some point God would deliver mankind. The implication also is that God would not just put enmity between the woman and the seed of the serpent, but also that the ultimate victory over it. And that this it implies some sort of redemptive thing for mankind. That initial prophecy in the garden, or certainly we take that. We take it that way because the crushing of the serpent under the foot of Christ is symbolic of our ultimate victory over death and over sin and all those things. Sin and death, those are the two interconnected, the main enemies. So he had said, "Get you out of your country." I wonder if this was maybe a delayed thing. He had said to Abram, "Come on, get out, get up, get out. Get out of your country. Get away from your father's house. Strike out on your own. And I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. Make your name great." It has. He changed his name first, though, obviously. From Abram, which means what? I forget what. I know Abraham means father, father of many nations. Abram means what? Exalted father. The original name of Abraham. Abram. It's got Ab. I know Ab is Abba, father, right? I guess ram means exalted, like a horn of a ram, though I'm sure they're not related at all. Linguistically, that's just a coincidence. But and I mean that. So get thee out of your country. So he was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Every time I read this part, though, it reminds me of a song long ago that I abandoned. I abandoned it because I used it was basically the melody that became Mark chapter 13. And originally I was going to use it for the speech of Stephen before he got stoned. Or Stephen, if you prefer. Men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto Father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he came to Haran. Said to him, "Get you out of your country, from your kindred." Before he had been in Haran, he had been instructed, or God had spoken to him. God had said to him, "Get up and go." It's possible that he had delayed. That's it. I think this implies he had delayed. Because now he is kind of old. Is that still good? Is the promise still good? Is that, when God calls you, the gifts and calling of God are without repentance. Not that we should take it for granted or dilly-dally, but God has been patient with many of us. And for this we should be thankful, and also take comfort, with gratitude, but not, taking it for granted, and trying to, use for advantage in some way the mechanisms whereby we're justified. The mechanisms that justify us, the blood of Christ, are not for us to use manipulatively to enable us to sin. It's not part of the package. That's not how it's supposed to work. It will forgive you of sin. I mean, you are forgiven through faith in Christ, but you should not take that for granted, even though you very well can. You could take that for granted, meaning in having faith. And having faith and obedience, you should take it for granted. You know, I mean, it's like, don't take, you know, I mean, but like, do not let that fact allow us for an evil heart of unbelief to enter in, where we start being unmindful of the precious covenant which has bought us. You know, this is the beginning of it. It puts me in mind of it. I would notice one of the first things: I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And in fact, in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And ultimately, yes, because through Abraham, Christ came. And really, I'd like to ask any Jew, what else do you have to offer the world? What else do you have to offer? For all of us to become Jews? You know what I mean? The Messiah is the only thing the Jews have to offer as far as to fulfill this. Because their own role in the world, they are a blessing, but not to the extent that Christ is. It so pales in comparison. And I mean, because they could make a case, say, well, you know, we try most, you know, the faithful Jews would say, to be good people and to do good works and to, you know, and to follow the law and to be a blessing by being upright people, you know. But the same could be said for anyone, any law-abiding citizen, you know, who has a philanthropic, you know, how are they especially a blessing compared to any other nation? Are they more a blessing than the South Koreans when they come as immigrants? You know what I mean? I mean, because that's the thing. And if you take it on balance, as far as if you look at it as a political question, there'd be a lot of dispute as to whether or not they're a blessing. I mean, because they're a blessing to some and not to others. And you could say the same of Christ, of course, that he's not a blessing to all, but he is not a curse on any, I suppose, right? Where some would say, you know, I mean, like I said, my sympathies lie with Israel, but I understand, you know, but I mean, the Palestinians, I understand their pain as far as, you know, they feel wronged. You know, whether or not the claim is justified, their pain is real. You know, the pain is real. That's for sure. And so, you know, for them, Israel is no blessing at all. You know, again, but that can be said of anything, because God has a white throne and he sits on it and he judges from it. And the things that come down out of that white throne are not blessings. They're judgments. They're condemnation. So to be a blessing, ultimately, is Abraham, you know, to be a blessing to all the families of the earth. And in that, there's no greater thing I can think of, especially when you look at it through the eyes of faith, knowing that Christ is not just a religion taken up by the Gentiles, but he is the power of God to salvation for both the Jew and the Gentile. And this is of the seed of Abraham. You know, and I will make of thee a great nation, and will bless thee, make thy name. And Israel has been a great nation. It hasn't been, you know, it didn't say the greatest nation ever, but, you know, the biggest empire to ever, you know, but a great nation. At one time, they were a small empire for a brief period under David and Solomon. You know, having dominion over other kingdoms. It was pretty much a definition of an empire. You know, having tribute kings. When you have kings over king, when you're king of kings, you're kind of an emperor, right? You know, like the Romans. Not all empires are the same or big, but, you know, they were a great nation. And even today, they're a great nation, are they not? Are they not feared by their adversaries? Rightly so. And I do think it is foolish, you know, to curse the Jews is the stupidest thing. If you are any kind of Christian, you understand. You say, "Oh, they're not really the Jews." Are you? You know, they're not. Look, I know a Jew is not a Jew that is one outwardly, but one inwardly. That's what Paul taught. Yes, secular Jews who do not follow the Old Testament. They're just ethnically Jewish. Now, the thing is, being ethnically Jewish and having at least a toe in the water, if they're not completely secularized, they still have the advantages that Paul talked about. What advantage did it have the Jew? I mean, as far as, to some degree at least, that they have contact with God through the Old Testament, and then by access through promise to the Messiah. And in this, even now, Jews are coming to Christ all the time. Young people in Israel, they push. As far as there is quite a push by some people to get things that they can see, because again, Israel is not North Korea, right? You can't go to Israel and preach to the people in the streets there the gospel, meaning the citizens. I don't think they. I mean, you might. But what I mean is like. I don't know what the law is per se, but I know that it is not considered something that they really appreciate, people coming and trying to convert them, especially the natives, right? The rabbis do not teach about Jesus. They don't talk about Jesus. That's generally speaking. Now, that's not across the board, right? But they people can watch videos online. This is not North Korea. They're not they're not told, they're probably told not to look at things, but this is not, the gospel of Jesus Christ is not pornography, though. And it's very difficult to, I think, keep people who are spiritually minded and curious about Messiah and promises like this from finding about Jesus. Because there's certainly no other figure in history who could possibly fulfill the scriptures that are written in the Old Testament concerning the Messiah, even though many of them are left unfulfilled. Many of them are left unfulfilled, right? And Jesus himself in his ministry, in the Gospels, is portrayed as not only acknowledging this, but sort of revealing this, what the gap theory, as it is profanely called, as Bullinger hates when people call it the gap theory. But I don't know what else to call it. It's a theory that there are gaps in the scriptures. And you know what? It's a very good theory. People say, it's only a theory, whatever. It's a good theory. There are gaps, sometimes in the middle of verses. And Jesus, he pointed out, he was reading Isaiah 61 or 60, what was it? 60 or 61? And he said, he closed the book. This day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears. He closed it because he didn't want to talk about the day of vengeance, not during his ministry. He closed it right at the part to proclaim the acceptable day of the Lord. He closed the book, scripture fulfilled. He said right there, we're going to go only that far. God drew an arbitrary line. Just like with the resurrections. It was always thought that the dead would rise and God would judge the just and the unjust in the resurrection, right? And that's the way it's said. But we didn't know until it was revealed that there would be two resurrections. The just would be raised. Their resurrection would be far removed from the resurrection of the unjust. And they appeared a completely different judgment than the unjust. That was one of the things I didn't understand as a kid, was that, and to this day, a lot of people don't understand that dual nature of that, at least two resurrection. There are at least two, because there's one that's designated as first. And then later on, when there is another one, it doesn't call it the second, but it's the second. Yeah. The second resurrection. The resurrection of damnation, as Jesus called it. Some to the resurrection of life, and others to the resurrection of damnation. And when he said that in Matthew, he made it seem like they were back to back, or at the same time. And they are technically back to back in the grand scheme of things. I mean, they happen one right after the other, but there's a bit of time in that after period. One right after the other is like, boop, 1,000 years or so, boop. If that 1,000 years is literal, of course. But anyways, so this is the beginning. Abram departs as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. Abram was his young nephew, orphan. I was about to say orphan, but not exactly orphan. Because he was probably older. So Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran, and he said God had said. Maybe he waited till his father died. It reminds me of, when in the gospel said, Lord, I will come with you, but let me bury my father. Sometimes there's no time. Sometimes we don't have time. We better get going. When God calls us, we need to move. If Abram got time If others had time, you know, sometimes there is, sometimes God is, I'm thankful that the Lord is persistent. I think about that time when Samuel was being called by God, and he kept thinking it was Eli talking to him. And he kept getting up and going, yeah, what do you want? Yeah, what do you want? And he's like, stop, just listen, I think it's the Lord. Because he was being spoken to. The voice of God is, it's funny because, like, if you're ever in trouble discerning it, it's because, you're mostly, you're listening to you. And it's actually your conscience. And if it's operating properly, it should be mirroring some image of what God is. As long as you haven't, we do a lot to damage our conscience through our lives. We don't want, we don't like those guilty feelings. We don't like those feelings. So sometimes what we do is we harden ourselves against them. Our emotions become, we try to control them so that we can do things maybe that we wouldn't otherwise do. So let's see. He goes, God is patient with us. He calls out to us. But when I talk about that patience, I mean, it's like he called out to Samuel, and then Samuel was like, didn't hear it. He went looking around for it. But he kept calling him, is my point. The Lord asks us to be persistent. And thankfully, in his calling, he also is persistent. There's some beautiful language in where, he pursues us like a young man pursues a woman, with that intent to woo. He draws us to him. All right, so he takes Sarah, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their substance and the souls they had gotten in Haran. Slaves and stuff, right? Servants, maidservants, manservants. And you say, oh, this is terrible. Why didn't God tell them no slaves, though, right? Here's the thing you understand about slavery. There was murder. God let murder happen. He protected the first murder. I mean, what do you think's going to happen when people start selling each other? He's going to step in and say, no, that's too much. He's going to let us do what we want. And apparently we like to buy and sell each other. Oh, a complete human. How useful is that? So, and, here's the thing about slavery. When it's going on, you're just a person in the world and there's slavery and people are selling people and all that stuff. What is your duty? Can you can't stop it. There's armed people. What do you do? If you have money, do you say, I don't touch slaves. I never have slaves. I'm too good for that. Or maybe it's your duty to buy as many slaves as you can. Maybe, because and here's the thing. It's like, well, I can't just buy people and then just say, hey, go, because then I'll be broke and nothing for my money. Because it's like, I want to help you folks out. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't live then. I don't know what I would be like. Probably just like the people of the time. I was raised in whatever, unless God had intervened, right? So anyways, so they come to Haran, to go forth, and they went forth to go to the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan he came. And that is the land that eventually God will promise them. But that is the place, come out of your country, leave, go forth into a new land. And he passed the land into the place of Sichem, to the place of Morah. The Canaanite was then in the land. So, again, was Canaan, according to some, yes, this is the Canaan of Ham. And there is a Canaan who is deleted from the genealogy in the Masoretic text, but not in the Septuagint. you know, which changes a little bit. And he was named Canaan, though I noticed they try to spell it differently. I doubt it was spelled differently in Hebrew, though. That's the thing. But I don't have access to the Hebrew of that text, so I only have, because the Septuagint's Greek, so. And the Lord appeared unto Abraham, or Abram, sorry, I keep going wrong, and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord who appeared unto him. And the Jews they got that land. They took it. They occupied it. They lost it. They took it back. They lost it. They took it back. And now they have it again. But to keep it, they have to please the Lord. He will spit them out if they do not serve him. And so what am I saying they're about? No, I'm not saying they're about to get. As far I know, I don't know. No, they've just been brought there. They just got there. Whatever's going to happen now is going to be historic in the future. Who knows? Maybe they'll turn to the Lord Jesus. I kind of think they sort of have to. That's sort of the promise, right? In the redemption of the Jews at the end. That's part of what, wilt thou restore the kingdom to Israel at this time? So I say, do not curse the Jews. Do not, and people say, well, they may not be Jews. Maybe they're Kenites. They're descendants of Cain, or they're Khazarians or something like that. And they're all that way, right? Where'd the real ones go? Oh, it's us. It's like, of course. I would be very careful. Even the fact of their reputation, that they are reputed to be, should give you pause. Because, think of that thing, whoever receives a righteous man in the name of a righteous man shall receive a righteous man's reward. It's like when someone that is called a Jew and then you degrade them or do them wrong, you can say whatever you want about someone. On the individual basis, if someone's a scoundrel, they're a scoundrel. If they're a son of Belial or of the devil, they're a son of the devil. And they may be Jew or they may be Gentile. The children of the devil come in all stripes. And such were some of you. That's just how I look at it. We have incidences in Israel, where the whole that thing with the men of what was the name? Gibeah. And the priest who came through, and his wife, his concubine actually, they raped and killed. And they slaughtered, and then the Israelites came and slaughtered the men of the city who were their own countrymen, fellow Jews, because they were so wicked. Because again, wicked men rise up. There's no special wickedness, and they're not especially righteous either. There are slight variations in populations and stuff, like people, like they have impressions about different groups of people, like, Italians like spaghetti or whatever, because it's some sort of ethnic food, sure. And Jews, they like money. It's like, well, who doesn't like money? Name me one race of people that doesn't have money-clutching people, please. But culturally, a lot of immigrants are raised with a very fiscally responsible. I remember, there's a side of my family that are immigrants, and they seem very like. I remember when I believed the Kenite stuff, I questioned if my family wasn't part Kenite at least, okay, certain people, because and it just because that's the way I thought. I was like, wow, I thought I might be, Jewish because that's how I believed at that time. I know the person on that side did a DNA test, and there's no Jew on that side, by the way, or on any side that I'm aware of. Still pure as wind-driven snow Gentile. And I say that with a laugh because it's, again, I often joke about that. I don't know what is pure. Pure what? Like, As people point out, what is the swarthy Italian compared to that blonde-haired, blue-eyed person up north? You know what I mean? There's a big difference there. Is that allowed if you're in your little racial world of purity? You know, again, I think in Jesus that those things become erased, or they should be erased, as it ought to be, because that was not how it should be not how it was from the beginning. God confounded man. You know, man would we could maybe all live and dwell together in peace, maybe under Christ, but even that we will find. I guess it's just men in the flesh. You know, because we know they went up upon the breadth of the earth, encompassed the camp of the saints about, ultimately. I mean, even in a world perfect where Christ is king, they still rebel. In the land of uprightness, they do not learn righteousness. It's astonishing, but it's so. So, unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar to the Lord who appeared unto him. He built an altar, I suppose, in the plain of Morah. Yeah. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. Whatever. Bethel is a famous place. Jacob's going to go there. It's a famous place throughout history. And it was because of the sin there. It was called, the name was changed by God from Bethel, which means house of God. And that's what, and Jacob is the one who calls it Bethel. It probably wasn't even called that, but this is the place where he was. Bethel on the west, Hai on the east. I'm not familiar with Hai as a place, and I don't think it's important. And there he builded an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And again, 1 second here. I'm going to just stand up and... Well, we can keep talking. All right. Call upon the name of the Lord. I was thinking of like how... I mean, it's hard to talk while I'm doing this. You know, then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. Right? And here, Abraham again calls on the name of the Lord. But we saw we kind of thought there was a negative connotation. I did. Because... men were in contact with the Lord from the beginning, right? Adam was, and then we assume it wasn't like, I mean, they didn't just suddenly discover God. In some way, they began calling on God's name. Some have suggested that, that we're not reading it quite right out of the Hebrew text, and that, I'm going to just turn off the camera for a second. And that perhaps that it means like, they called other things by the name of God, or, somehow, and that is the way we have taken it, I believe, right? But here is where he makes his connection, I would say, makes his connection with God. Where he really makes the connection where he begins to call upon God by name. I don't know how he knows the name of God. That's a bit, because we encounter Moses and he doesn't know his name. And I presume that because I think it's ancestral knowledge. It has to be. Abram is not that far supposed to be descended from Noah. Even if it was more generations than we know. Let's say that not only is Canaan missing, like every other name is missing or something like that, or let's say that was something like that. And there was a lot more time between Noah. The power of traditions and of memory. I mean, because like I said, even in far-flung societies throughout the ancient world, there were traditions of floods and catastrophes going back. It's not just, just one person thought of this, or it's a common trope. They just make up these fictions about floods. No, the people wanted to remember. And from the time of Adam, I presume, to the time of Abraham. And Abraham, still knowing, even if that genealogy is incomplete, even if the time is long, much longer, he is still a kingdom heir. He is still knows who his fathers are. I believe he still can trace himself back. I mean, that's my thought. Just being, how and it is very important who your father is. As far as people trace that, and they, especially in that time, that's why we have these things. But what if it skips a generation where there's no one worthy of the name? Because what if every name in the genealogy is the worthy ancestor? Like someone who was like Noah walking with God, or not. I don't know. Because in the Seth line, because it is a godly line, not because they are a more godly people, though. Not everyone is the same level of sin, but from the high perspective of God, when you look at it from 10,000 feet, they all look the same. Is the way I would put it. We're all alike sinners. The same deficit of character leads us to whatever sins, and that same deficit is still unacceptable wherever we look at it, however we look at it, from whatever angle. I think that if he's calling on the name of the Lord, which is here Yahweh, in Hebrew, and whenever it says the Lord and it's all caps like that, it has been Yahweh. I don't really acknowledge, I haven't looked as we've gone through, like in chapter 1 and say, oh, this is the E source and all that, because it's God, 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 right? And then it's the Lord, and people say, that indicates a different source. Perhaps. Like I said, I do think of, Moses, I don't think he would have from whole cloth made up Genesis. That doesn't make sense. He would have had to have source material, of course. That he came down with tables of stone. People think he came down with, the whole book of Genesis or something, like God had dictated it to him. That's not how it works. I don't believe it works that way. That seems, it could work that way, but I don't think that's how it worked. It would, that's why sometimes people have trouble believing, because that's the kind of book they have a certain expectation. If God wrote a book, what would it be like? And God didn't exactly write a book, though it is his book. It's not the very handwriting of God in every sense, but some of it is. But it's all there by intent. God intends for all this to be there. I do believe that. But anyways, so the fact that we have Yahweh sometimes and we have Elohim the other, they say, that's the different texts being woven together. In the very early part of Genesis, and it's mostly just that early part. Yeah, sure, I don't have a problem with that. Like there was a creation, maybe, whatever. There's all kinds of ways you could speculate about the different things that what input Moses had. Because we know Moses as the lawgiver. Of course, we're going to look at, when we look at his laws, I expect Exodus is a product of Moses and all that. Yeah. Leviticus, Numbers. And even it's very clearly, it says Moses, write it all in a book and all that. It's like, but the Genesis stuff, though it's part of Moses, it's part of the books of Moses, it doesn't necessarily mean that Moses wrote it. It just means that was what Moses delivered to the people. They have the books attributed to him. Those are the books that came down. That was the original Hebrew Testament, before the prophets, before the kings, before any of that stuff, before the Psalms. It's the basis for their nation, the books on which it was founded. And and the thing is, the scholars who think it was all made up in Babylon are nuts, because you have to have a history from which to fall from. You don't get that perspective just afterwards. Whatever. Like I said, we should be reasonably skeptical of stuff just for the sake of this, because we do not want to let someone who has done something they shouldn't have done, which is maybe alter the word or whatever, their misdeed should not, I'm not going to let that get me. So I'm going to have a little bit of skepticism about certain things, lest I be pushed into a position that is, like I said, like I've said before, maybe not here, but I've said it in different places. Like, I just think when you're talking about age of Earth or something like that, like when you contradict so much, like I can't think that all the people who study it, they're all out to just falsify the evidence and lie about the evidence, and it's all just a big plot to deny the truth, which is so obviously seen by, I don't think so. I mean, I've looked at it. I would never assume so. You know what I mean? You have to, if there's a consensus, you have to give it at least some sort of like consideration. If there's a position that's popular and tried over time and, it's been around, like Young Earth, whatever, you can't, I don't want to just dismiss it out of hand. But, I do not want to allow myself to become compromised in some way because I'm distorting reality to make it fit what I believe, essentially, and not necessarily what God has said. I don't know that God is, it's what God means. I'm way back in Genesis 2, but it's important. It's an important issue to me. As someone who's like, I gotta think about what it means. I gotta think about what to say about it. And it's gotta be right. Or, I gotta at least be conscientious about it. It doesn't all have to be right, but it has to be morally right. You know what I mean? I have to say things. I don't mind if I mispronounce someone's name, or if I say someone's the cousin of so-and-so that's not, and I just make a mistake, that's fine. I don't care if I get the numbers wrong and the dates wrong. But if I were to tell you to put your trust in something other than Christ's blood for your salvation, if I get that wrong, if I were to tell you that Christ was something less than the Son of God and God incarnate, I wouldn't want to get that wrong. We got to be right about the most important things. And the smaller things will follow. I want to be, he that attends to that which is least is also attentive to that which is greatest. So, even though we have small responsibilities, that doesn't mean we shouldn't attend to them. But we should not confuse small responsibilities with, what would I call it, trifles, or just things that are distracting and not significant. You know what I mean? Where you're straining at gnats instead of, while you're swallowing a camel. You're not really paying attention to the most important things. That's what I'm saying. It's like wherever there's gnat straining going on, there's also a lot of camel swallowing. You can guarantee it. So the souls. Oh, I was talking about slavery. Yeah, it's like, maybe working for Abram's better than working for Belzar, because he rapes all his slaves, He likes to buy young slaves and rape them. So maybe Abraham should buy as many slaves as he can. And again, you got to get your investment back. So, okay, we're going to work. We got a project. It's the ancient world. Aren't you glad you're not being butchered? I don't know. People try to apply today's morality and standards to the old times. It doesn't work. Back then, you died quickly and horribly, if you got out of line. It was not the world we live in. And people trying to apply our moral... We've abolished slavery mostly. Mostly. There are still people being forced to do things against their will. Even in this country, especially when you're talking about things like sexual slavery and stuff, and prostitution, and where people are in situations where they're kind of being held and they kind of can't get out, and they kind of can't, yeah. Or they've come from, they don't speak the language, they've been held in some weird parlor thing, it's like they the world is full of wickedness. And also people that are promised jobs and they're shipped off to countries in the Middle East and they find their passports are taken away and then they work till they die. Or till they escape. Yeah, there's modern day slavery. It's still going on. And you know what? Guess what? All the people who go, slavery is bad in the past, and all those people, they were bad people. You know, it's like, you don't even give a crap. You don't care. Not even a little bit. Not even a little bit. They just say that to posture and to make themselves seem important and moral. Oh, I'm such a good person. I disapprove of slavery. And racism, too. I'm so good. So full of virtue. I disapprove of bad things. I'm against pedophilia and murder. I'm such an upright. Yeah, I get it. Okay. Wow, you're really striking out there with bold positions. that's a really, sticking your neck out there, really looking to get some negative attention on that one. How dare... Right. They went forth. So he journeys on, going still towards the south, and there was a famine in the land, and he goes down to Egypt. Okay. And the famine was grievous. Yeah, there was... it's interesting, because Abram lived, I think, just on the cusp of the end of the Bronze Age. Like, there was a civilization that Abram was part of that's, like, on the verge of collapsing. And is about to collapse all around them. And you kind of see that happens. And Israel is what rises out of those ashes. And the chaos that ensues. And there was a lot of famine. And there was people got up and started migrating and stuff. That's why the Philistines came. Because the sea peoples and all this stuff. They came to Egypt also. And it was there was a lot of calamity, which, and here's the thing, is Genesis perfectly, in Exodus, it perfectly goes along with that stuff. The children of Israel, they begin to sojourn in Egypt and they wind up slaves. It's not surprising. What do you think would happen if our civilization collapsed? What do you really think would happen? Like, let's say that through some sort of experimental drug given to people that supposedly would help them, but ends up shortening their lives significantly. And let's say a lot of people start dying off and the fertility goes down, and pretty soon there's just a lot less people. Let's say we go from 6 billion people, or 7 or whatever, 8, wherever we're at, down to let's say we go from 8 down to 6. And you think well, that's great. Your population. It's like, no. There are already... We have not enough people to run everything. We have a lot of, I remember a guy talking about how, like, a airline mechanic, he was sort of troubled because they all are old. They all have gray hair because there aren't a lot of young mechanics. As far as people not going into it enough. A lot of skilled labor jobs are not being filled. What do you think happens when people start dying off? Especially if they start, like, killing off men in the prime of their lives. A lot of them. I'm just saying, what would happen if that happened? If we had a disaster, famine, people starving? Well, you may not want to work at the electrical plant or whatever. We got to keep the lights on, so you're going to work at the electrical plant. And you may not want to be a ditch digger, but we need ditch diggers, and you're going to dig a ditch. Because they will force you to work in what is needed. And that's what... Especially if your civilization collapses while you have a big government, it will enslave you. That's almost certainly what happened. It doesn't really, he knew not Joseph, yeah, but it's like circumstances also lead to the enslavement of the people. As society crumbles, and the chaos, to prevent the chaos, the impulse of the people in charge is to lay down the law, so to speak, and become authoritarian. And then to make people do get them doing things and working and productive for the purposes of the state. And that's not efficient or good or anything, but it will work in its way. And when things are crumbling, sometimes it's the only thing that works. Because if things are falling apart and every man just looking after themselves and doing, for themselves, every man just doing what is right in his own eyes, like it says in Judges. In fact, there was no king in the land, and every man did what was right in his own eyes is like a refrain from Judges. And it really speaks to the chaos of that period. Abraham lived in this world that's just about to crumble. So he's gone down to Egypt. I mean, not that it completely, but there was like several major civilizations are going to completely vanish, like the Hittites. They're so gone that scholars used to laugh at the Bible, saying there's no such people as the Hittites. Again, this is because of that radical skepticism. You should have skepticism. Even of the Bible, it's you want to be trusting and believing, of course, but be skeptical of what you think you believe. What we think. We want to be like a new wineskin, able to receive new wine, because God, sometimes things that are in us get old. Sometimes they don't belong. We have to be exercised of them. Okay, so he's in Egypt, and I guess I would like to save this whole thing for Monday. So we will let's say we're going to pick up at verse 11 because we already talked about going into Egypt. We're going to just start talking about the incident with Sarai here. And we'll see how far we get. Thanks for joining me. We'll look forward to being back again on Monday. Until then. Oh, no music here. Come on.
I speak that which I have seen with my father, and ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said unto them, if ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. Ye do the deeds of your father.